Jake Carter moved into the Sunridge Trails neighborhood with one simple plan: retire early, ride his vintage Harley, and stay the hell out of other people's business. After 20 years fighting wildfires, he'd earned some peace. Sunridge Trails was neat, polished, and almost too quiet. The kind of place where the lawns were surgically trimmed, garden flags all flapped in the same direction, and neighbors judged each other by the sheen of their mailboxes. Jake wasn't worried. He kept his property clean and his noise low. His Harley, though, that was non-negotiable. The motorcycle was a 1979 shovel-head, a roaring symbol of freedom he'd rebuilt with his own hands. After retiring, it lived proudly in his driveway under a custom canvas tarp when not inside his detached garage. He treated it like a firstborn child. But in Sunridge Trails, even that could be a problem. And the problem had a name: Beverly Monroe. She was 5'1", but moved like she was 6 feet tall and wearing a badge. Her silver bob was styled within an inch of its life, and her HOA president badge gleamed like a sheriff's star. Beverly had a reputation in the neighborhood, especially among newcomers. People called her the rulebook in heels. Jake first met her 3 days after moving in. He was out front polishing the Harley when he heard deliberate footsteps clacking across the pavement. Beverly stood at the edge of his driveway with a clipboard in one hand and a fake saccharine smile on her face. "You must be Mr. Carter," she said, not waiting for a reply. "Welcome to Sunridge Trails. I hope you've had time to review the HOA handbook, especially sections 3.4 and 6.2. Jake looked up from the chrome. "No offense, ma'am, but I just finished unpacking my silverware." She didn't laugh. Section 3.4 covers visual obstructions and non-stationary noise vehicles. Motorcycles fall under both, especially ones with exposed engines. Jake raised an eyebrow. "You mean my bike? I mean your rebellious centerpiece," she said with a wrinkle of her nose. Jake gave a slow nod, resisting the urge to smirk. "Got it. Thanks for the welcome." She left, but not before scribbling something on her clipboard. That night, Jake found his first violation notice on his front door: inappropriate display of non-compliant vehicle, visible from the street. He shrugged it off. After years of firehouse politics and emergency calls, one cranky neighbor didn't faze him. But Beverly wasn't just cranky, she was calculated. By the end of the week, Jake had received 2 more violations, one for unauthorized engine noise after 5:30 p.m. He started the Harley at 5:32, and another for non-responsiveness to HOA corrections. He wasn't one for conflict. He installed a side privacy fence, started parking the Harley deeper in the garage, and kept it silent most evenings. But Beverly wasn't satisfied. For her, this wasn't about rules. It was about obedience. Jake represented everything she feared: independence, defiance, and most importantly, a loss of control. One evening, Jake came home from a quick taco run. As he pulled into the driveway, something on the garage door caught his eye. A note. No envelope. Just a typed letter. Taped center mass. Final warning. Remove the motorcycle. By Friday, or enforcement action will be taken. Sunridge Trails HOA Compliance Division. Jake stared at it for a second, shaking his head. There was no compliance division. Beverly was freelancing. He crumpled the note and tossed it into the trash can by the garage. That same night, he noticed a white sedan parked across the street with its headlights off. He couldn't see who was inside. The next morning, he got a call from his insurance company. Someone had submitted an anonymous complaint, claiming his garage was illegally storing flammable materials. Jake knew exactly who it was. But what he didn't know was how far she'd go, because this wasn't just a neighborhood feud anymore. This was a fuse. And it had just been lit. And that's just the beginning. Friday came faster than Jake expected. Arizona skies had turned gray, and the wind carried the kind of humidity that hinted at a storm. Jake stood in his garage, staring at his Harley. He hadn't ridden it all week, not since Beverly's last warning. Something in his gut told him to be careful. He wasn't scared of her, not really. But something about Beverly Monroe's obsession with control. It didn't feel like normal HOA pettiness anymore. It felt personal. Jake spent the afternoon installing a new lock on the garage door and added a small motion sensor camera facing the driveway. It wasn't paranoia. It was protection. Beverly had crossed the line from annoying to unpredictable. That evening, Jake grilled a steak, cracked open a cold beer, and tried to relax. For once, the street was quiet. No kids biking, no sprinklers running, and strangely no Beverly. She hadn't done her usual walk today. No clipboard, no clacking heels, no disapproving stares. He should have known that silence was a bad sign. At 1:14 a.m., Jake was jolted awake by a loud bang outside, like something metallic being knocked over. He grabbed a flashlight and opened the front door, but from the porch, everything looked calm still. He walked to the side yard and checked his motion sensor feed from his phone. Nothing. But his gut twisted again. So he waited. At 3:42 a.m., the motion detector finally triggered. Jake sprang up from bed, heart pounding. On his phone screen, he watched grainy footage of a figure sneaking across his lawn toward the garage. Small build, wearing black, carrying something in one hand, maybe a bottle. Jake's blood ran cold. He grabbed his keys, slipped on boots, and ran out the back door, circling around. But by the time he reached the garage, the smell hit him first. Gasoline. He reached for the handle and flung the garage door up and froze. The Harley was still there, but someone had poured gas all over the floor. A trail of it ran under the bike and pooled beneath the gas tank. And sitting in the corner, like a sick joke, was a red Bic lighter. Jake picked it up carefully, turning it over in his hand. It hadn't been used. Not yet. He backed out of the garage and called 911, reporting an attempted arson. Then he checked the video feed again. The footage wasn't clear enough to make out the face, but the body language was unmistakable. The stiff walk, the precise turns, the way she paused, like she was thinking about whether to light it or not. It was Beverly Monroe. Jake barely slept. By morning, 2 officers showed up. Jake showed them the footage, gave them the lighter in a plastic bag, and gave a full statement. They took it seriously and attempted fire. Gas used as accelerant. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a felony. Jake watched from his porch as the officers knocked on Beverly's door later that day. She answered in a pastel robe, looking like she'd just stepped out of a brunch. They talked briefly. She laughed, shrugged, then shut the door. That was it. No arrest, no citation, no consequences. That evening, Jake received another note. This one wasn't printed. It was handwritten in sharp, angry cursive. Last chance. That bike is a hazard. Remove it, or next time no one will stop the fire. That night, Jake didn't sleep at all. And the next morning, the Harley was gone. Not moved, not towed. Gone. Garage door smashed open. Burn marks on the ground. Ash in the air. And that's where everything changes. Jake stood in the garage, staring at the blackened cement floor. The Harley was gone. In its place were scorch marks, melted rubber from the kickstand, and the faint scent of gasoline still lingering like an insult. It wasn't just theft. It was a message, and Jake wasn't the type to let messages go unanswered. When the police arrived, he pointed to the busted lock, the gasoline residue, and the damage. He told them about the note, showed them the lighter, and pulled up the video footage again. But the officer shook his head. Not enough to charge her. Can't even positively ID her in that footage. Jake's jaw clenched. You're telling me she can try to burn down my garage, come back and actually finish the job, and you can't touch her? We'll escalate it, the cop said, sounding like he'd already moved on. But unless you have video of her actually committing arson, we're limited. Jake knew what that meant. File the report. Bury it in paperwork. Case closed. He stared at the empty garage for a long time after they left. That motorcycle wasn't just a machine. It was a part of him, something he rebuilt when his life was falling apart. After a career of chaos, that Harley gave him control. Now it was gone, and the person who did it was sleeping peacefully to doors down. But Jake wasn't just a retired firefighter. He knew how to investigate a scene. And he knew how to wait for the right fire to burn out the next day. Jake started digging. First stop, the HOA office in the community clubhouse. He requested meeting minutes, financials, incident reports, anything with Beverly's signature on it. The HOA clerk, a young guy named Kevin who looked one sideways glance away from quitting, hesitated. Those records aren't really public. Jake leaned in. I have a felony arson investigation and a destroyed vehicle. If you don't help me, I'll file a complaint with the state board and drag every HOA name through it. Kevin blinked. Give me 20 minutes. What Jake found in those records turned his stomach. Beverly Monroe had been issuing unofficial citations to homeowners for over a year, writing her own notices on fake letterhead. The HOA board didn't even know. And worse, she'd used those violations to force people out. One homeowner left after racking up $12, zero in HOA fines that were never authorized. Another sold his property under pressure, and Beverly's daughter-in-law just happened to buy the place a month later. Below, market value. Jake checked the name. Elena Monroe. It wasn't just personal vendettas. Beverly was playing real estate games with people's lives. He kept going. He pulled her meeting attendance logs. That's when it got weirder. There were no logs. No HOA meeting had been held in 3 months. But Beverly had continued enforcing fines, complaints, and board decisions. Jake had her. She wasn't just a self-righteous neighbor, she was running an HOA dictatorship. One that had cost people their homes. And maybe, just maybe, the HOA didn't even know it. Later that night, Jake returned to the garage. He swept away the ash, then pulled up the last feed from his motion-activated camera. He enhanced the video and paused it at a frame showing the person's shoes. He zoomed in. Red heels. Wedge style. The same pair Beverly wore every Tuesday during her compliance walk. He sent the image, along with everything else, to his lawyer friend in Phoenix. You want a lawsuit, the guy said, because you've got one. But more than that, this lady's cooked. You get one neighbor to back you. You can go after her for HOA fraud, harassment, and civil damages. Jake smiled for the first time in days. Good. Because I'm not just suing her. He turned and looked out the garage window at Beverly's house. The porch light was on, and a motion light flickered as she stepped outside, glancing suspiciously at his yard. Jake didn't flinch. I'm going to take down her entire little kingdom. But before Jake could make his move, Beverly made another. And this time, it wasn't just about Jake. Sunday morning came in with a dry wind and low thunder. But it wasn't the weather that warned of a storm. Jake was in his garage when he heard the shouting. A woman's voice, angry, high-pitched, and another, calmer but firm. He stepped outside and saw Beverly Monroe standing on the sidewalk with her arms flailing, and a familiar blue clipboard in hand. She wasn't yelling at him. She was screaming at Lexi, the 17-year-old daughter of Jake's neighbor, Miss Clara. Lexi had just pulled into the driveway on a beat-up Yamaha scooter. She was wearing a helmet with stickers on it and smiling like a teen with freedom for the first time. But Beverly was on her like a hawk. Unregistered vehicles are not permitted in HOA lots. You're violating Article 4.2 of the vehicle policy. Lexi looked confused. It's a scooter. It's a motor vehicle, young lady, loud, unsafe, and disruptive to our community environment. Miss Clara stormed out from the porch in her robe, eyes blazing. You don't get to scream at my child. I will call the police if she brings that noisy trash here again. Jake's fists clenched. He crossed the street without saying a word, stepped in between Beverly and the family, and looked her dead in the eyes. You need to back off. Beverly blinked, taken off guard. This doesn't concern you, Mr. Carter. It does when you start threatening kids over a scooter. This is harassment. Beverly's nostrils flared. Then maybe your entire block needs to be reevaluated. The board will hear about this? You mean you'll write another letter on fake letterhead? Jake said calmly. Her mouth twitched. I know everything, Beverly. You've been running this HOA like your personal empire. Falsified violations, fake fines, forcing people out. I've got records, videos, and I'm taking it to court. For a moment, just a flicker of one, Beverly looked rattled. But it vanished as quickly as it came. You think you can threaten me with your little files and rumors? I've been running this neighborhood longer than you've owned socks. She turned and stormed off, but she didn't go home. Instead, she walked straight to Jake's mailbox and snapped a photo of it. Jake narrowed his eyes. She was escalating again. That afternoon, he started knocking on doors. Most neighbors had stayed quiet, afraid of Beverly and her clipboard wrath. But once Jake showed them copies of the phony fines and board decisions, the mood shifted fast. Old Mr. Rodriguez from 2 houses down, hit with $900 in decor violations for leaving his flag out overnight. The Thompsons? Beverly denied their solar panel request twice, then approved the same request for her friend across the street. Jake gathered statements, emails, and every dirty document from the HOA records he printed. He even got Kevin from the office to admit on a recorded phone call that Beverly had more control than she's supposed to. By sundown, Jake had 7 neighbors on board to sign a formal complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate's HOA division. And then something unexpected happened. A man in a gray Ford Explorer pulled into Jake's driveway. He wore slacks, a Sunridge Trails HOA security badge, and carried an envelope. I'm serving you a cease and desist order, he said flatly, filed by the HOA president. Claims you're intimidating board members and trespassing on HOA property. Jake opened the envelope. He laughed. This isn't real, he muttered, scanning the paper. There's no attorney signature. No board member names. Just hers. Sir, I'm just doing what I was told. Jake looked him in the eye. She made this up. She's playing law enforcement now. The guy shrugged. Then maybe it's time someone stopped her. That night, Jake met with his lawyer and emailed everything: videos, letters, neighbor testimonies. It was all going to the HOA board, the state, and his insurance company. But before any action could be taken, someone broke into his backyard at 2:07 a.m. His motion cameras caught a figure climbing the fence and dropping something behind his workshop. A small red gas can and a single matchbook. Jake didn't call the police this time. At 2:07 a.m., the backyard footage was clearer than ever. Same figure, same build, same stiff, prissy walk. The person had climbed the fence trespassing again and left a red gas can and a matchbook beside the corner of his workshop. A message, another threat. But Jake was done playing it safe. He was done filing polite complaints while Beverly Monroe stalked the neighborhood, like some unhinged hall monitor with a god-complex dot by 8 a.m. Jake was at the HOA headquarters downtown. He didn't just bring the footage, he brought a storm. A binder of signed neighbor testimonies, printed copies of fake violation notices, side-by-side comparisons of Beverly's forged letters versus official HOA formats, recordings of Kevin, the HOA clerk, admitting she'd been acting without board approval. The receptionist tried to brush him off. Jake wasn't having it. "If you don't let me speak to someone today," he said, calm but firm, "my next stop is every news outlet in Phoenix. And believe me, they'd love a story about an HOA president who's using gasoline threats and fabricated fines too. Rig real estate deals." That got their attention. Within an hour, he was speaking to an investigator from the state HOA Oversight Division, a no-nonsense woman named Rena Marks. She took one look at the forged notices and said, "We've been waiting for someone to come forward from that neighborhood." Jake's eyebrows rose. "You've had complaints before, anonymous ones," she said, flipping through Jake's binder, "but never with this level of documentation. You just kicked the door open." Rena promised to launch a formal inquiry and requested written affidavits from the neighbors. Jake agreed, and before he left, she handed him her direct line. For the first time in weeks, it felt like someone was on his side. But the victory was short-lived. When Jake got home, his gate was wide open, and his backyard garden had been stomped through. Whoever it was hadn't just walked through it, they'd deliberately destroyed the raised planter boxes he'd built. Tomatoes crushed, sprinklers pulled up. One planter was snapped clean in half. Jake checked the cameras again. Footage showed someone in a hoodie, wearing gloves and keeping their head low. No visible face. No red heels this time. They were learning. Jake seethed. But it also gave him clarity. This wasn't going to stop with paperwork. Beverly was escalating every time he got closer to the truth. And if she was willing to destroy his bike, threaten his garage, and now send someone to trash his property while hiding their identity, there was more to uncover. He called Kevin from the HOA office. "Do you have access to Beverly's old meeting notes, her actual files, not the ones she sends out to the residents, her personal records?" Kevin hesitated. "If I say yes, I lose my job." "You'll lose more than that if this goes to court and they find out you helped hide evidence." There was a long pause. Kevin caved. That night, under the cover of darkness, Jake met him at the back door of the community clubhouse. Kevin unlocked the file room and gave him 15 minutes. Jake scanned everything. Meeting logs from 5 years ago. Names of homeowners who'd voluntarily sold after fines and violations racked up. But something deeper caught his eye. Property transfer records. Multiple homes sold within 6 months. To Sunridge Development Group. Jake checked the LLC registration, the managing partner, Elena Monroe, Beverly's daughter -in-law. It all connected. Beverly was abusing her position to bleed homeowners dry, force sales, and then funnel the properties to family-owned companies at a discount. It was HOA corruption at the highest level and possibly federal level real estate fraud. Jake took photos of everything. By the time he left the file room, Kevin looked pale. "You need to be careful," he whispered. "She knows when people get too close. She's not just bluffing." Jake gave him a hard look. "I'm counting on it." When he got home, a box was sitting on his porch. No return address. Inside, a charred piece of chrome, the side mirror from his Harley. On it, a message scrawled in red marker, "You should have left it alone." Tuesday night came heavy with anticipation. The community clubhouse parking lot hadn't been this full in years. Folding chairs lined every square inch of the main hall. Neighbors crowded the walls. and whispers filled the room like static at the front of the room. A long table with the HOA banner faced the audience. Beverly Monroe sat dead center, her hair sprayed to perfection, dressed in a seafoam blazer like she was presiding over a royal court. Her smile was glued in place, but her eyes flicked nervously toward the door every few seconds. Jake Carter walked in holding a black binder thick with evidence. He didn't head to the back. He walked straight to the front row and stood tall, facing the bore-down Beverly. The room quieted. HOA Vice President Dale Sanderson stood, clearing his throat. This special session of the Sunridge Trails HOA is now open. We've received a formal request to address potential misconduct within the board. Mr. Carter, you've asked to speak. Jake nodded once. I have. Dale gestured to the podium. Jake stepped forward and took a deep breath. My name's Jake Carter. I've been a resident here for 6 months. In that time, I've been issued fake violation letters, harassed, had my garage broken into, my property vandalized, and worst of all, my motorcycle was torched to the ground in an act of arson that nearly set my house on fire. Gasps rippled through the room. Beverly crossed her arms. This is not the time for theatrics, Mr. Carter. I'm not finished, Jake said, voice steady. He held up the binder. These are documents showing a pattern of unauthorized HOA violations sent by Ms. Monroe, using falsified board letterhead. Multiple residents, at least 10, were fined, harassed, or pressured into selling their homes under false pretenses. Most of those properties were later purchased by Sunridge Development Group. He turned a page, which, according to public records, is run by Elena Monroe, Beverly's daughter-in-law. More murmurs. Jake scanned the crowd. Beverly didn't just abuse her power, she used it to profit. That's fraud. And if anyone needs more proof. He walked to the projector and plugged in a flash drive. Footage played, Beverly entering Jake's property in the middle of the night, dumping gasoline, the matchbook, the red heels. I've submitted this and all supporting documents to the Arizona Department of Real Estate and the HOA Regulatory Board. He looked back at her. I'm pressing charges. This reign of terror ends tonight. The room was dead silent. Beverly stood slowly. Her face was unreadable for a moment. Then her smile cracked, and what came next stunned the room. You think you're some kind of hero? She hissed, voice rising. You think any of these sheep care about rules? I built this community. I kept this street safe, orderly, valuable. And you? You're a walking noise violation with a wrecked biker toy. She slammed her clipboard on the table. You people let your yards grow weeds. Let your brats ride scooters down the sidewalk. Paint your doors red like a low-income motel, and you want to throw me out. I was the only one keeping this place from turning into a trash dump. Neighbors who'd once feared her were now standing, voices rising. You called my daughter a nuisance. You fined us for bird feeders. You made my wife cry over a mailbox color. Someone threw a rolled-up newsletter across the room. Another neighbor shouted, "We're calling a vote right now." Jake stepped aside and let the board take over. Vice President Dale stood, visibly rattled. Effective immediately, a motion to remove Ms. Monroe as HOA president is now open for vote. All in favor. A forest of hands shot up. Beverly looked around in shock. Her face blotched red. Her lip quivered. You're all fools. You'll regret this. You'll be begging me to come back when this place crumbles. Security approached as she began shouting incoherently. Jake Carter is a criminal. He vandalized his own garage for sympathy. He set up the camera. It's all fake. You'll see. She was escorted out, screaming the whole way. Jake didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because when he returned home that night, Another box waited on his porch. Inside wasn't another charred bike part. It was a USB drive. No label. Just a sticky note. You missed something. A friend. Jake stared at the USB drive lying on his kitchen table. No branding, no label. Just a single yellow sticky note stuck to the front. You missed something. A friend. His gut twisted. He booted up his laptop, disconnected it from the internet, and slid the drive into the port. The folder opened automatically. No malware warnings. Just a single file named board_meeting_audio_April 22 5.mp3. He clicked it. The recording began with muffled microphone static. Then a voice he recognized all too well. Beverly Monroe. She's not just out of control. She's getting reckless, she said sharply. Rodriguez asked too many questions about the fines. I want a letter on his door by Friday. And Jake Carter, he needs to go. Another voice responded deeper, calmer, male. You sure about Carter? He's got law enforcement contacts. You mess this up, we're both screwed. Jake's heart froze. He didn't recognize the voice, but it wasn't Kevin. This man had authority, someone inside the HOA, or worse, above it. Beverly laughed bitterly. Then torch his toy, make it look random. I don't care how you do it. Just get him out of my community. Jake's hands curled into fists. He kept listening. The audio continued for 11 minutes, every second a bombshell. Proof that the arson was ordered. Proof that other residents were being targeted, not just cited. And finally, the worst of it. The man's voice said, Development Group has approved the next 3 homes for sweep. We'll lean on violations, call in our inspector, and get the homeowners out before the 4th quarter. Elena already has a buyer lined up from Scottsdale. Jake paused the recording. His jaw clenched. They weren't just playing HOA dictator. This was organized real estate fraud. Targeted evictions. Forced sales. Profits skimmed off broken lives. Jake's motorcycle. Just collateral damage in a bigger scheme. And the man in that recording, he was the real puppet master. Jake checked the HOA's leadership page. Only 2 other men served in senior positions. Dale Sanderson, the vice president. Brent Lorman, head of HOA security and compliance. Jake remembered Dale looking rattled at the meeting. But Brent was the guy who'd served Jake the fake cease and desist letter days earlier. The one who showed up with 0 legal authority, but just enough fake confidence to intimidate. That voice on the audio, it was him. Jake was sure of it now, and it meant Beverly hadn't acted alone. She was the mouthpiece, but Brent Lorman, he was the enforcer, the cleaner. The one who probably poured the gas and left the box on Jake's porch. Jake backed up the file 6 times to flash drives, 1 SD card, and emailed copies to his lawyer, Rena at the state HOA division, and even a local news reporter he trusted. Then, he made a plan. The next morning, he walked straight into the Sunridge Trails security office. Brent was sitting behind the desk, leaning back in his chair like a man who didn't know the walls were about to collapse. Jake dropped the USB on the desk. Thought you might want to hear yourself talk. Brent's eyes narrowed. He didn't. Pick it up. You should be careful where you get your recordings, Carter. Jake leaned in. And you should be careful which garages you break into. Brent didn't flinch. You think exposing Beverly gets you a medal? She's replaceable. You're still a target. I'm not the one sweating, Jake said, straightening. He turned and walked out, but not before tossing one final grenade. By the way, the state's opening a full investigation. RICO implications. You know what that means, right? Brent's smirk finally cracked. That night, Jake got a call from Rena. We've received your evidence. It's enough to launch a federal-level investigation into HOA fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. But Carter, you need to be careful. If this guy's who we think he is, he's got ties to private development firms across the state. People like him, they don't go down quietly. Jake hung up and stared out the window. The neighborhood looked peaceful again. Quiet driveways, porch lights glowing. But he knew better now. There was still one more move left to play, and Brent wasn't finished yet. Jake didn't sleep that night. He sat by the front window with a thermos of coffee, his phone in one hand, and a second phone and old burner line in the other. He'd spoken with Rena again after dinner. The state had already frozen Beverly's access to HOA accounts and flagged Sunridge Development Group for audit. But Brent was the wild card. Guys like him, Rena had said, they don't go down with paperwork. They burn files and, sometimes, people. Jake believed her. So he laid the trap. He left his backyard gate unlocked, the workshop door slightly ajar. A box marked records. HOA evidence right inside the doorway. It wasn't real, just shredded. Magazines wrapped in manila folders. But it would look real enough to a man like Brent. And in the far corner of the workshop, tucked high on a shelf, Jake mounted a second hidden camera, this one infrared, with a cellular uplink that streamed straight to a server outside of state lines. If Brent took the bait, there'd be no denying it. At 3:12 a.m., the sensor tripped. Jake's pulse surged as he saw the figure creep through the side gate, dressed in black. Flashlight low to the ground. Brent Lorman. Same build. Same walk. He slipped into the workshop. Didn't hesitate. Pulled a lighter from his coat and leaned over the records box. Jake didn't wait. He hit send on the burner phone. 3 blocks away, an unmarked police vehicle received the text, suspect in location. Live arson attempt. Camera stream confirmed. They'd been waiting. The fire inspector Jake had called. After his bike was torched, he was an old friend, and he'd already suspected this wasn't Beverly's solo gig. 5 minutes later, sirens shattered the night. Brent heard them too late. He tried to flee out the side, but caught a flashlight beam in the eyes. Hands where we can see them. Now, 2 officers tackled him to the lawn and cuffed him. Brent shouting the whole way, "I was just cleaning up. You don't understand. I work for the HOA." Jake stood calmly in his robe and boots as the cops hauled him away. "I guess the HOA is hiring felons now," he muttered to one officer. "Or is gasoline disposal part of the new neighborhood watch?" The officer didn't smile, but he nodded. "You did good, Carter. This guy's going away for a long time." By morning, the neighborhood knew everything. News vans lined the street. Reporters buzzed with details. HOA corruption ring busted. Former president and security chief arrested. Links to forced evictions, arson, and real estate fraud exposed. Jake didn't speak to the cameras, but Miss Clara did. "My daughter got screamed at over a scooter while these people were stealing homes out from under families." Jake stood up. He fought back, and he won. Even Dale Sanderson, the shaky HOA vice president, stepped up. "I had no idea," he said to the press, his voice shaking. "They bullied the board too, but not anymore. This HOA will be rebuilt. And we're starting with accountability." 2 weeks later, Jake received a settlement check from the HOA's insurance provider. $47,500. More than enough to replace his Harley. But he did in single quotes T. instead. He gave most of it to a neighborhood legal fund so the next time someone like Beverly or Brent tried to bully people behind the mask of HOA rules, the community would have lawyers of their own. And then, one quiet Saturday, Jake rolled a new motorcycle down his driveway. A 2025 black and silver Indian chief bobber. Sleek. Powerful. Silent until it wasn't. He revved it once, not out of defiance, out of victory. Across the street, neighbors clapped. Miss Clara waved. From her porch, even Dale raised a glass of iced tea. Jake smiled. Sunridge Trails was quiet again, but this time for the right reasons. Call to action, and that's the end of Hoakaren took justice into her own hands and torched my motorcycle. If you've ever dealt with an HOA horror story, drop your experience in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who's tangled with a power-hungry Karen dot, because sometimes the best justice doesn't come in court, it comes onto wheels and a roaring engine.